one measure of racing heartbeats. Some wind in the hair. Some sweet, sweet music. And one big smile of pure driving pleasure. And there you have it, a better car. When we created Servo Futura Synth, it was never about making a better engine oil. It was about making cars better. Servo Futura Synth, 100% synthetic engine oil from Indian Oil.
This is TV18. And you're watching CNBC TV18.
India Business Hour brought to you by Lodha, India's premier luxury development company, TVS, Living, Breathing Asia, and Toyota Etios and Liva.
अगर आज चर्चा करनी है और आज का कोई हीरो है तो मेरे 6 करोड़ गुजराती हैं। अगर चर्चा करनी है तो उनकी कीजिए, यश देना है तो उनको दीजिए, और कुछ सीखना सिखाना है तो मेरे गुजरात के मतदाताओं से सीखिए।
Narendra Modi does a hat-trick, secures his third consecutive term as Gujarat's chief minister, but falls just short of a two-thirds majority, begins a spirited march into national politics with a promise to serve India. The Congress dethrones the BJP in Himachal Pradesh with an absolute majority.
Meanwhile, the banking bill is passed in both houses of parliament. Sources tell CNBC TV18 guidelines for issuance of new bank licenses to be finalized by month end itself. Finance Ministry to write to the RBI with its views tomorrow.
India and ASEAN conclude talks for expanding their free trade agreement. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh says the move will boost trade to around $100 billion by 2015.
Cairn may revise its production guidance downwards in January. Reservoir problems in Rajasthan make a hike in production tougher despite government approvals.
On street signs, markets end in the red. The Nifty loses 13 to close at 59.16. The Sensex slips 22.
And globally, Intercontinental Exchange agrees to buy NYSE Euronext, which owns the New York Stock Exchange, for $8 billion. But Wall Street is only interested in a deal on the fiscal cliff. The deadlock keeps Wall Street in the red.
Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on India Business Hour. The big news of the day is, of course, the election result, the election verdict that's coming from Gujarat and Himachal Pradesh. Narendra Modi has created history. He's become the first BJP chief minister to retain his throne for the third time in a row. The 62-year-old Gujarat chief minister had the backing of urban Gujarat and won 115 of the 182 seats. The Congress won just 61 seats, most of them in rural Gujarat. However, 115 is still two less than his tally in 2007. Modi's impressive victory has also seen him make a markedly definitive move towards the national political arena. Breaking away from tradition, his victory speech was in Hindi. In addition, he called the victory in Gujarat a victory for all Indians and sparked off a fresh debate about him being the BJP's prime ministerial candidate in the 2014 general elections, a speculation party officials have refused to comment on.
गुड गवर्नेंस और डेवलपमेंट ये अगर जमीन पे दिखाई दे तो जनता बाकी सब बातों से ऊपर उठ करके उचित फैसला करती है, और गुजरात की जनता ने वो फैसला किया है। देश की सरकारों को, देश के राजनीतिक दलों को खोखले वादे, झूठे नारे, उससे बाहर निकल करके उन्होंने हर किसी हालत में जनता की आशा आकांक्षाओं को पूर्ण करने के लिए ईमानदारी से कोशिश करनी चाहिए। समाज के एकाध तो हिस्से को नाराज भी किया होगा, 2-4 गांव को भी कभी नाराज किया होगा। तत्कालीन शायद मतदाताओं को यह भी लगा होगा कि मोदी जी ऐसा क्यों कर रहे हैं। मेरे साथियों को लगा होगा नरेंद्र भाई ऐसा क्यों कर रहे हो, लेकिन परमात्मा ने जो रास्ता दिखाया था और जनता की भलाई के लिए मुझे करना जो जरूरी लगा था, किसी भी बद इरादे को साथ नहीं, निष्ठा और प्रामाणिक के साथ जब किया था, तो उस समय तो शायद कुछ माहौल पैदा हुआ होगा, विरोध का माहौल भी बना होगा, लेकिन उन्हीं मतदाताओं ने समय रहते उस कठोर निर्णय को भी गले लगाया।
The man of the moment hat-trick for Narendra Modi as he leads the BJP to a landslide victory in Gujarat. But then again, it wasn't all gloom and doom for the Congress party either. They at least have managed to regain control of Himachal Pradesh back from the BJP. The Congress has secured a clear majority in the state in the polls. Outgoing Chief Minister P.K. Dhumal conceded defeat, and the man who led the Congress party in the elections this time, Veerbhadra Singh, said that the election was dominated by local issues and anti-incumbency against the BJP. However, he stayed mum on the question of who the next Chief Minister of the state will be.
अभी दौड़ शुरू हुई है, अभी निश्चित है.
Hello. But it was an election for the Congress to win. Has it been a tough call, or you feel that it's...
Naturally, we are, they were in power. We are outside the power. We are going to earn from the power. It's a tougher job for us to do.
But did your national issues dominate the issue here in terms of LPG hike and everything?
There were local issues.
But would you be the chief minister?
Well, I can't say about that.
Well, that's Veerbhadra Singh, and the suspense continues on whether he will be appointed Chief Minister of Himachal Pradesh or not. The usual Congress power games on Veerbhadra Singh refusing to come to Delhi. A decision perhaps on this front could be taken over the next 2 days. But to discuss the implications of the victory that Narendra Modi has seen in Gujarat and of course the victory that the Congress has seen in Himachal, we're joined by Rajdeep Sardesai, Editor-in-Chief of our sister channel CNN-IBN, FICCI President and Country Head of HSBC, Nanawal Kidwai, and Sunil Jain from the Indian Express. Appreciate you joining us here on India Business Hour. Rajdeep, let me start by asking you, what does this third victory for Narendra Modi mean? Also, take us through the Himachal Pradesh results and what we can now expect from the 2014 elections, because it's being pegged as the Rahul versus Modi election.
Well, Narendra Modi, by scoring a hat-trick of victories in Gujarat, has clearly established himself as a leader who believes now that he has the platform with which to move from Gandhinagar, possibly to play a greater role within the BJP leadership at the centre. However, to suggest that just as a result of this victory, come tomorrow morning, Narendra Modi will be the prime ministerial candidate of the BJP clearly does not reflect the reality. Modi has established his credentials as Gujarat's Neta #1. But is this victory enough for him to establish his credentials as the BJP's national level leader #1? I think there's still a question mark over that. There's a section of the BJP, particularly the party workers, who believe he can galvanize the party and he can woo the urban middle class. And that is what Modi is hoping will propel him eventually to a greater role come the elections of 2014. But clearly the wider message that has gone out in this election is that BJP today is the dominant parties in Gujarat. The Congress, despite having the so-called satisfaction of preventing Modi from a 2/3 majority, was well behind Modi. There was one warning signal for Modi that in rural Gujarat he didn't do as well as in urban pockets, which is why Modi must also be questioned on whether his vibrant Gujarat phenomenon that he calls it has really extended beyond the big cities of Gujarat. For the Congress, there will be some comfort though with what happened in Himachal Pradesh. This could have been a 2-0 rout for the Congress, and that would have really demoralized the Congress. By winning Himachal Pradesh, not only has the Congress got a fig leaf to hold on to, but importantly, a section of the Congress will believe that economic reform is not such a bad thing. Remember, most people thought that the LPG factor would bring down the Congress in Himachal. That did not happen. This suggests that if you are able to project a regional leader strongly and then take benefit of the anti-incumbency, you can win state elections. State elections are not lost simply because you go in for tough economic decisions. I think that's one clear message that came out of what happened in Himachal. But the broader message is clear. Both the national parties, if they are to retain their relevance in the future, they have to empower state leaders. The BJP did that successfully in Gujarat, which is why you have the Narendra Modi-like leader emerging. The Congress failed to do so in Gujarat, partially succeeded in doing so with Veerbhadra in Himachal. But clearly, these elections cannot really offer a pointer to the future. General elections at the end of the day are an aggregation of several state elections. And really, who wins those big battleground states of UP, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Bihar, Maharashtra? These 5 states, along with Bengal possibly, these 6 states will really decide who controls the gaddi of Delhi come 2013 or 2014 when the general elections are held.
Well, you're absolutely right, Rajdeep. Never take the gaddi for granted. But let me get Naina Lal Kidwai in on this discussion. Naina, Modi's victory, as per the BJP and as per Modi himself, is being seen as a victory and a vote for governance, Modi-style governance, for someone who has understood the issues of development, or at least been able to sell the idea of having understood the issues of development. We've seen corporate India coming out in support of Narendra Modi's victory. Is it because corporate India identifies with Modi's style of governance?
At the end of the day, Gujarat is seen as very industry friendly, and what you have here is a vote not just for industry and progress therein, but the ability to basically deliver across all the human factors, the social indicators across the board. And I think it is a model that many states can look to follow in terms of infrastructure development, industry, employment. But let us not forget that Gujarat has always had the Gujaratis' entrepreneurship and ability to work at its base. And Gujarat has, ever since I can remember, been one of our more industrial states, always in the top 3 or 4. So at the end of the day, it is about ensuring that that path of growth and progress remains. And I have certainly seen.
But sorry to interrupt you, Naina. What is it about Modi's style of governance that appeals to corporate India so much? Is it the fact that there is a certain degree of predictability, there is more consistency in the style of operations as opposed to other state governments? Whenever he organizes the vibrant Gujarat campaign, the who's who of corporate India lines up there. What is it about brand Modi that appeals to corporate India so much?
So, any investment decision is basically, yes, about predictability and regulation, less corruption. It's about the ease of doing business. It's about labor and the employability of that labor and the skill of that labor. And at the end of the day, it is about the perception and experience that you have on the ground. So many of the corporates that show up there are already on the ground, and so it's a show of strength about, hey, we're happy to be here. And for those that are looking to see what's working for others, the perception is as important to manage. So to manage an environment which is investment friendly is very, very critical. And to recognize that industry, both manufacturing and the service sector, huge employment opportunities for the youth are important. But it's employment for the youth only if the youth are educated. So you need the level of education, commitment, work culture, all as a very key part of making that investment equation attractive. And Gujarat also has the infrastructure. They have invested well in power, in roads, and will continue to look at ways to do this. In fact, I remember hearing from Mr. Modi how his commitment to the DMIC, the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, is pretty much done. I mean, he has handed over the tracts of land, etc., that is needed because he sees the merit of a corridor such as this, which passes through a large part of Gujarat.
I want to put the same question to you. What do you think brand Modi and why it appeals to corporate India so much? He's often called the CEO of Gujarat, not the Chief Minister of Gujarat. He's the best Chief Marketing Officer that Gujarat could have ever had. Why do you think Modi appeals to corporate India as much as he does?
Okay, before I come to that, I just want to make one point, about what you began with, about this election being, or the 2014 election being one of Rahul Gandhi versus Narendra Modi. I think the great similarity between the two is something which has not been appreciated by anybody at all, which is that Narendra Modi is not, and I repeat, not going to be the BJP's prime ministerial candidate for now, from whatever I understand, Narendra Modi will be the chief campaign manager.
The BJP is going to let Narendra Modi
So
take center stage at the national level, despite this victory and this win.
He will be the campaign manager, which means that he gets center stage. The media, that is you and I, will claim that he is the prime ministerial candidate, but it will keep Nitish Kumar mollified, and so he won't lead the NDA. If the BJP within the NDA gets a large number of seats,
but Sunil, why would you say that? Is it the threat of Nitish Kumar and the other NDA allies walking out of the NDA, or is it power play within the BJP itself that will prevent them from making him the prime ministerial candidate?
I think as far as the BJP is concerned, he's got 115 seats, and as Shwapan was saying earlier in some other program, no other BJP leader can come even close to him. So I think as far as the BJP is concerned, that leadership challenge is over. He is the leader, but you don't want to disrupt the NDA. So the party cadres want him. So if the BJP is going to put Narendra Modi as the chief campaign manager, if he can galvanize the cadre, if he can get things worked out, and he gets enough seats, then he becomes the prime minister. If he doesn't, then he just goes back to Gujarat. So I think that's it's a great strategy, because the other guys don't walk out. Now, to come to think about why does corporate India love Narendra Modi, I think it's very simple. You go back to Godhra and you look at the revulsion in corporate India and among corporate leaders. Anu Aga, Ratan Tata was one of the guys who came out, one of the gentlemen who came out and talked about Narendra Modi, behaving in a partisan, communal kind of manner. Now, the moment you get confronted by Mamata Banerjee, the same Ratan Tata has no compunction in going back to Narendra Modi. So I think what happens.
So you're saying corporate India's alliance or corporate India's support is based on convenience?
Well, I mean, you can call it convenience. I wouldn't be so cynical. I said you got to run business, so you want to go to a chief minister who can give you land. You don't want to go to a government which is going to give you reservation among promotions. You want to go to a government which says that I will give you industry, I will bring industry. I will not. You don't want to go to a government who says I don't want industry. So I think corporate India is being sensible. They want a gentleman who can give them some work. They can. That's what their fondness is. Whether Narendra Modi can deliver that same promise at the center, which he could deliver in a state in which he is completely in control, is a different matter. I don't think Narendra Modi, for example, can tell a POSCO that I will grant you land in Odisha. He cannot. So Narendra Modi's ability to deliver to industry will be dramatically different as the prime minister, if he becomes the prime minister, as it is when he's the Gujarat chief minister. But it is that promise which is getting industry to move towards him.
Let me pick up on the point that Sunil was making, and we've talked about Narendra Modi being this pragmatic chief minister, who's trying to drive investment. He talks about job creation, one of the very few chief ministers who actually uses that as an election issue. But how do you explain the fact that the very same Narendra Modi then would oppose FDI and multi-brand retail, at least publicly will oppose things like FDI and multi-brand retail, opposes vehemently the goods and services tax? Negotiations haven't moved forward because of opposition from states like Gujarat. So, he's also trying to balance that pro-development face in Gujarat, the pro-investment face in the state, and the anti-Congress reform style face at the center.
Yeah, and certainly GST for us in industry and at FICCI is a very important one, and we have engaged with Mr. Modi on this and will continue to. So I can only think that we are just not being persuasive enough, because a man of his ilk and intelligence, I'm sure, appreciates that GST is good for the country and industry wants it, and we have to now make sure that if he has reservations, that we can tackle those. And I'm very confident we will.
Sunil Jain, do you actually see Narendra Modi changing his mind on either the GST or FDI and multi-brand retail?
Well, Shireen, to be honest, I'm quite surprised by what Naina is saying about GST, because the assumption seems to be that Narendra Modi is actually balancing the interest of, the anti-Congressism with development. I think it's very, very clear that there are enough chief ministers in the country who oppose GST. These are Congress chief ministers as well as BJP chief ministers, as well as Bihar chief minister, for example. And the reason is very clear. Under Pranab Mukherjee, the central government had said that they would not compensate any state for a loss in revenue here.
Yeah.
Now you cannot introduce a GST while not promise to compensate for the loss in revenue.
Sure.
So,
but do you believe that Narendra Modi perhaps could now drive those negotiations forward?
No, Shireen, the negotiation on GST are not being driven by Narendra Modi or by Arun Jaitley.
I know, but the opposition of Gujarat has been a big stumbling block.
No, the opposition of Gujarat has been because there has been no compensation. The moment now Mr. Chidambaram has come in as finance minister, he said that this is a valid, demand of the states. I've set up a committee. I'm going to examine it. So the moment the chief minister, the moment the finance minister starts being, conciliatory and says I'm going to examine demands, I think Narendra Modi or anybody else will concede to those demands. So I think we need to be very clear that some of these things are not pure political. I think FDI in retail, I'm convinced is political. I mean, there I'd agree with with what you've been saying, but GST is not one of them. And one more point, just to address a question raised by, a point made by Rajdeep, that Narendra Modi never got enough seats in Gujarat, and therefore vibrant Gujarat is really a city-specific kind of phenomena.
Yeah.
I'm sure Rajdeep knows better, but I find it impossible to believe that any state, Gujarat is the only state in the country, which for 10 years, year on year, quarter on quarter if you like, since you're CNBC, which for year on year has delivered a 10% agricultural growth. Nobody else has done it. You cannot have a 10% agricultural growth year on year and yet believe that you didn't have rural prosperity. So I don't know why he never got votes in rural Gujarat, but there was clearly rural prosperity.
Well, we could continue this conversation, but unfortunately, we've completely run out of time. So, Neil Jain, Naina Lal Kidwai, Rajdeep Sardesai, I appreciate you joining us here on India Business Hour. Elan, Parliament session, it's the end of the winter session of Parliament at least.
Well, adjourned sine die, as they put it, in winter session of Parliament ending today, and it has turned out to be the most fruitful session, in fact, of Parliament in the past 2 years. The Parliament took up 35 bills for consideration, including 25 for passing and 10 for introduction, and crucial economic legislations to get the consent of both houses were, of course, the Banking Law Amendment Bill, Prevention of Money Laundering Bill, the Sarfazi Act or the Debt Recovery Bill, and the Companies Bill was passed by the Lok Sabha and it's waiting for its nod from the upper house. Banking Bill has passed both houses. The government also got a shot in the arm by defeating the opposition's vote to block FDI and multi-brand retail. That's of course one of the bigger headlines that's emerged from this session. But 106 hours of work were lost due to disruptions, and also crucial bills like the Insurance and the Pension Bill, the Coal Mine Amendment Bill, Land Acquisition Bill, the Food Security Bill, all these have now been put on the back burner and are likely to come up only in the next session, the budget session.
But nevertheless, it was one of the most a session where we saw a lot of progress in Parliament today, and we've also seen the banking bill being cleared by the Rajya Sabha, and sources in the Finance Ministry telling us that the final guidelines for bank licenses are likely to be issued by the Reserve Bank by the end of the month. The Finance Ministry is also expected to write to the Reserve Bank on the process of issuing those guidelines. Akanksha Sethi joins us now with the details. Akanksha, what are your sources telling you? How soon can we see the Finance Ministry writing to the Reserve Bank of India on this issue?
Well, the Finance Ministry is very keen to fast-track this, so that letter is going as early as tomorrow. The Finance Ministry is going to write to the RBI asking them to finalize the guidelines on banking licenses. Now, the key change that is likely in these is, and remember this is a story that we had first broken right here on CNBC TV 18, that there are likely to be 3 categories of banks instead of just one minimum capital requirement of 500 crores. There will be separate capital requirements for these 3 categories, and these will include local banks, regional banks, and national banks, and then of course there will be international banks. Now, the Finance Ministry believes that if you really want to extend the agenda of financial inclusion, then you need to have lower capital requirements for local banks. So these could be between 30 to 40 crores. And then for the large national level banks, it would be around 500 crores. There had been demands to increase the 500 crore capital requirement, but the sources in the Finance Ministry say that it is likely to stay at that. Now, the Finance Ministry says that within the next 6 to 8 months, it is likely that applications will be processed and you should see the first licenses get issued. Now, the banking bill was the RBI's major concern, and with that out of the way, by July they say that new banking licenses should be issued. Back to you.
Right, so final guidelines by month end, possibly. That's what we're picking up. Akanksha, thanks so much for joining us with that. Up next, India and ASEAN conclude talks for expanding their free trade agreement. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh says the move will boost trade. Details when we return.
Cain may revise its production guidance downwards in January. Reservoir problems in Rajasthan make a hike in production tough.
Take off to Singapore. LSE presents the Done Deal Quiz. A unique quiz on general knowledge and a measure of your fun quotient. Grab your chance to win a trip to Singapore. Let's celebrate your valuable contribution.
Media partner CNBC TV 18.
Happy birthday! Let's take a picture.
You say I do, I say can we talk? You say we do, I say see I. You say we kiss.
Samsung Galaxy Note 2. Incredibly creative.
Well, India and the ASEAN nations today have announced the successful conclusion of negotiations to expand their existing free trade agreement, although no date for operationalizing the pact was announced. Listen in to the Prime Minister.
I'm very happy that we have decided today to elevate our relationship to a strategic partnership. This, Excellencies, is an historic step, and together with the conclusion of the negotiations on FTA in services and investment, defines a qualitatively new paradigm for our partnership.
Big boost for trade. Let's go across to Siddharth Zarabi, who was at the summit venue. Now, Siddharth, so when's the pact likely to become operational to begin with?
Sometime in 2013, that's the message as far as the date for the signing and operationalizing of the expanded free trade agreement between India and the 10-member ASEAN bloc is concerned. That's the message that is coming at the conclusion of the India-ASEAN special summit held here in New Delhi. Clearly, there were expectations that perhaps a specific timeline would have been announced, but perhaps last-minute changes and the fact that all the 10-member ASEAN nations need to go back to their respective cabinets to get approval of the expanded pact, that perhaps leading to a situation where many more months could be taken as far as getting this pact finally inked is concerned. But countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia and several others clearly saying that they would want this expansion of the FTA, which has now been concluded after several months of long-drawn negotiations. This essentially means that beyond the goods FTA that we already have, India and the ASEAN nations will have unhindered tariff-free access across several product lines in services as well as for investments. So for investments, countries like Singapore very keen on greater access into the Indian financial system, and India of course demanding some sort of reciprocity in that aspect too. As of now, the targets that have been set for expansion of trade between India and the ASEAN is $100 billion by 2015, and Salman Khurshid, the Minister for External Affairs, making it clear that India expected greater tariff-free access for its companies into the ASEAN member nations, mentioning, for instance, Indian carriers, specifically talking about the fact that infrastructure companies and public-private partnerships could also be expanded. So clearly, a summit that has delivered some expectations, even though the timeline for the signing of the expanded FTA not yet coming through clearly.
Well, that's right, Siddharth. And broadly, what I heard from the commerce ministers at the ASEAN summit was that the operationalizing could take at least a year from now. But now on to CNBC TV 18 exclusive. We learned from sources that Cain India may revise its production guidance next month. Why is that? Because we learned Cain India has been forced to relook its production targets. Nayantara Rai joins us now with the details. Nayantara, what exactly is the problem? Because Cain has actually been able to get approvals from the government. So where are they facing the trouble?
That's right, not good news coming in for Cain India. In fact, the stock also under pressure today. Basically, what I picked up from my sources is that the company is facing pressure problems at its reservoir in the prolific Rajasthan Barmer oil fields, specifically at the Bhagyam oil field within the Barmer fields. It got permissions, all the requisite Government of India approvals 11 months ago to hit a production of 40,000 barrels a day from Bhagyam. However, that production currently at 20,000 barrels a day. Currently, the total output from Rajasthan is at 175,000 barrels a day. It has all the approvals to have a production of 190,000 barrels a day, which is 8% higher. But because of the pressure problems it's facing at the reservoir, Cain India has been unable to ramp up production. I also understand from my sources that a team is monitoring this very, very closely and will be updating, if there is any need, will be updating analysts in the third week of January what its new production guidance is going to be. Now, what is very interesting is that even as Cain India is facing all these reservoir problems in Rajasthan, we have consistently been seeing Vedanta's chairman Anil Agarwal, who's of course the Vedanta's now promotes Cain India, reaching out to the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, the Petroleum Minister, writing several letters saying how they should be allowed to carry out further exploration activities in Rajasthan so they can have an output of 300,000 barrels a day. All this at a time when the company is facing reservoir pressure problems and is unable to reach the target level also of 190,000 barrels a day. We did reach out to the company for its comment. The company said is working on debottling the pipeline in Rajasthan, and it is simultaneously drilling the residual 20% wells in Bhagyam, and if there is any need to update on the guidance, it will do so as per the company policy in the third week of January at the time of announcing its quarterly results.
Ryan, and thanks so much for that. So Cain to revise its production guidance, that's what we're picking up. Up next, all the global cues. New York Stock Exchange sold for $8.2 billion to rival Intercontinental Exchange. Details when we return.
Bringing the world together.
Bye.
Bye.
I'd go to a juice bar for a fruit cocktail. If we weren't stranded in the middle of nowhere. In this age of technology, it is criminal to worry about getting lost. So much for your technology everywhere. No network, I've already tried.
It is this innovative thinking that HCL brings to all technology solutions.
Hey, Mr. HCL, you're always on fire! Mr. Banker, I'm afraid this time you are. Yeah.
Innovative thinking, technology that touches lives. HCL.
Our top global story, the Intercontinental Exchange plans to buy the NYSE Euronext for a whopping $8.2 billion. Now, the Intercontinental Exchange is a 12-year-old exchange based in Atlanta and trades energy and commodity futures. In a cash and equity transaction, ICE will pay $33 for one NYSE share, which is a 38% premium to NYSE's closing price yesterday. If the deal gets the backing of regulators, the combined company will become the world's third largest exchange group. So that's the big one. The NYSE Euronext being picked up by ICE, of course, pending regulatory approvals.
But Shireen, as we said, the only deal that Wall Street is hoping for is the deal on the fiscal cliff, and stocks are mixed as uncertainties over a resolution to the fiscal cliff situation weighs in on investors. So markets have even shrugged off the decent GDP data that was released. So US economy growing at 3.1% in the third quarter, not enough. Existing home sales have also managed to ride, but it is fiscal cliff that is on the top of investors' minds. So mixed essentially at this point. Flat to negative trend for the Nasdaq. The 31st of December deadline fast approaching.
And we are hoping that there will be some sort of a breakthrough as far as negotiations on the fiscal cliff are concerned. Back home markets, not really impressed with Narendra Modi's big win in Gujarat because it was pretty much factored in. There was also no support coming in from global markets, which were edgy. The Nifty finally saw an intraday reversal, closed above the 5,900 mark. The Sensex shutting sharp at 19,453 a land.
Well, the Securities Appellate Tribunal, the SAT, has dismissed the appeal by two Sahara Group companies for an extension of their deadline for submission of documents to SEBI in the OFCD refund case. Now, Sahara have sought time till 31st of January to submit the documents. The tribunal has said that Sahara's appeal is not maintainable as the Supreme Court has already given directions in the same matter. A Supreme Court order had directed the two Sahara companies to submit the documents by the 28th of December, which is incidentally today. And Sharina, just a couple of hours left, so wonder what Sahara is doing at this point.
Well, absolutely. All we know is that truckloads of documents have been sent SEBI's way. But up next on India Business Hour, the market regulator calls for more accountability for bankers to safeguard retail investors from faltering IPOs.
Shubhkamna Champions Golf Tournament presented by Shubhkamna Advert. Good wishes, good homes.
We innovate to make your travel experience congestion-free. We envision a greener tomorrow where abundant power empowers you. A future where you never run out of clean water. One with clear blue skies and cleaner air to breathe. Hitachi, the leader in social innovation business, is building cities that are greener and more comfortable to live in through our innovative technologies. Hitachi, inspire the next.
Welcome back. Now, the back and forth over a safety net for investors seems to be coming to an end. Market regulator SEBI is inclined to introduce a series of measures to beef up retail investor safety in the new year. Sajid Mangat and Sandeep Shrikant report that more accountability from bankers is actually one of the cornerstones. Take a look.
SEBI Chairman UK Sinha's pet project, investor protection, is all set to get a leg up. Nearly 2 months after releasing a draft paper on a safety net mechanism, indications are that the market regulator is leaning towards increased safety for retail investors who invest in IPOs, especially against mispricing of issues.
The safety net paper, believe me, is not meant to actually compensate the investors. The safety net, the whole idea, the rationale behind it is to ensure that there is some amount of sanity in pricing. And my feeling is that if there is a good pricing and the disclosures are correct and well laid out, issues will come and issues will be successful.
SEBI's draft proposal seeks to shield any IPO investor who invests up to 50,000 rupees and caps the safety net at 5% of the issue proceeds. Exchanges have voted supporting the proposal, especially given the huge variance in information available about various issues which affect pricing.
Irrespective of the size of the prospectus, there is huge asymmetry of information. In fact, there is asymmetry of information between the company and the investment banker. And then what is transpiring in form of the prospectus is even more asymmetric vis-a-vis what actually the person is going to read. Even assuming a retail investor has enough time and reads up whatever 1,000 pages, there is still a huge asymmetry of information. And somewhere on the line, the pricing is not only about the fundamental value of the company, but also a variety of things.
As things stand, the safety net mechanism will be triggered if the underlying stock price falls over 20% above the fall in the benchmark index. But there are many who question SEBI's methods.
If you see that issues are overpriced, you deal with it, you engage, there's a question of moral suasion. But if you say that if the price falls below X, you will have to pick it up. A mandatory safety net, whether a diluted form or a strong form, it's a wrong metric that gets applied, and that applying the wrong metric will take you to the wrong results.
But SEBI's logic is compelling. It claims that of the 118 IPOs that listed in the last 3 years, 72 issues are trading below both their issue price and the benchmark indices. The stock price on 25 companies fell by 25 to 50%. The price of 21 stocks fell 50 to 75%, and one stock has fallen over 77% compared to the benchmark index. Issuers and investment bankers are worried that these statistics could sway the SEBI board, which will take up the matter when it meets in 2013. In Mumbai with Sajit Mangat, Sandeep Shrikant.
Well, up next, will the debt-ridden Kingfisher Airlines find a savior in Etihad? Details when we return.
हर पल आपके साथ।
Lovely machine. It has a lot of potential for the fleet. Solid bike. It's value for money.
Fantastic handling. It's a great off-roader as well.
A very nice package. It's going to be one of my all-time favorites.
The fine line between the ordinary and the extraordinary. CNBC TV 18 Overdrive Awards 2012. This January in New Delhi.
Print partner Overdrive and Sports Illustrated. Online partner Magazine Mall. On-ground partner TGIF.
Welcome back. And what's happening in the aviation space? Kingfisher Airlines, we understand today, applied for its license renewal to the aviation regulator, the DGCA. Sources in the aviation regulator suggesting that Kingfisher's application will be considered only after the airline submits a credible revival plan. The debt-ridden carrier's license will lapse, do remember, post the 31st of December this year. But in the meantime, CNBC TV 18 learns that Etihad executives today met Kingfisher officials. However, talks remained inconclusive, and Kritika Saxena joining us with more on the Kingfisher Etihad deal talks. Kritika, we've seen Etihad speak to Jet as well, and now it seems it's Kingfisher's turn. How really is that panning out? Because that will, of course, have an impact on Kingfisher's revival strategy.
Well, we told you last week that Etihad will be meeting Jet Airways and Kingfisher Airlines in order to discuss the likely contours of the deal. Now, we understand from our sources that just the way Kingfisher Airlines had submitted an official, or rather an interim revival plan to the lenders earlier this week, we learned that a similar revival plan has been submitted to Etihad. Etihad basically needs clarity on what exactly Kingfisher Airlines plans to do with its operations. So, we understand that Etihad has asked Kingfisher Airlines to come up with a concrete plan. They are not happy with the interim plan that has been submitted. Kingfisher Airlines has told Etihad that roughly employees are expected to receive an official complete payment by Jan 2013. Aside from that, they've also indicated to Etihad that they will be starting a partial operation soon. Again, something that had been told to lenders. In terms of the contours of the deal, they have discussed that if the deal goes through, Etihad is willing to negotiate the amount of financial stake that they'll be taking in. Kingfisher Airlines is willing to come down on the price, considering they need the investment. But till Etihad gets a concrete plan, which is expected to come in by next week, they will not take the final call. We understand that the Etihad board will be meeting soon. So currently, Jet again has an edge, but we of course need to wait and watch out to see if at all KFA does submit a concrete plan as to how it plans to revive its operations and its workforce and the overall functioning. And of course, the DGCA bit has to be clarified as well with Etihad.
So Kingfisher Airlines trying to chart out its course. Kritika, thanks so much for joining us. All eyes now on what emerges from those deal talks. But in the meantime, the new entrant in the high-profile IPL Indian Premier League, the Sun Group, today unveiled the name of the Hyderabad IPL team, and they will be called Sunrisers. The former India captain K. Shrikant and VVS Lakshman will be mentors to the team, and Tom Moody will be the coach. Up next, the banking bill has been amended to fast-track new bank licenses, and Chennai-based Shriram Group is in line, and more on their plans now that the Parliament has approved the bill.
Power Finance Corporation Limited offers to the public tax-free bonds rated CRISIL AAA stable by CRISIL and ICRA AAA by ICRA with an annual coupon of 7.69% for 10 years and 7.86% for 15 years for retail individual
अबे यार लाइट भी अभी जानी थी यार।
नया मोबाइल इंटरनेट।
इंटरनेट?
मोबाइल पे
तेरे?
उत्तरी रोनाल्डो।
क्या कर रहा है?
कुछ नहीं, तुम लोग कल देख रहे टीवी पे पुराना मैच। ए मोटे बड़े, हाँ सुनना,
जो तेरा है वो मेरा है यार।
क्या?
जो मेरा है वो तेरा है, जो तेरा है वो मेरा, जो मेरा है वो तेरा है, जो तेरा है वो मेरा।
Welcome back. With the Rajya Sabha also giving its nod to the banking bill today, Chennai-based Shriram Group is hoping their long-standing plan for obtaining a banking license will now bear fruit. But it's waiting for the final guidelines to come out before it makes a final decision. And we understand that could be by this month end itself, the guidelines. Swati Narayanan finds out more.
The Shriram Group has been looking to make an entry into the banking arena for some time, and the road ahead looks easier now that the banking bill has been cleared by the Parliament. Though the management is not willing to convert their flagship entity Shriram Transport that provides financing for used trucks into a bank, the group is ready to consider converting group company Shriram City Union Finance and NBFC into a bank if they are given sufficient time.
Our preference will always be for a new license, because we believe that as a new license we understand some of the risk appetite and dynamics involved in going through in handling this kind of customer segment.
The company is confident that their ownership structure will not be a hindrance to getting a banking license. They are also clear that they will not take the inorganic route if they are given a license.
We are essentially already poised to actually grow if we get a banking license as per the kind of requirements we have. So we are really not looking at a merger with any smaller bank at this point in time.
Besides the banking foray, the group is also planning to raise funds for Shriram City Union Finance. They are planning to raise about 700 to 800 crore rupees through the QIP route and other options to support the company's growth plans. In Chennai, Swati Narayanan.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap up India Business Hour tonight. Stay with us, Your World at 10. Up next.
India Business Hour brought to you by Lodha, India's premier luxury development company, TBS, Living, Breathing Asia, and Toyota Etios and Liva.
Meet the new boss, your customer. The data she shares from comments, reviews, and social networks tells a company what to make, what it's made from, how it's shipped, and the way it's sold. Some companies are increasing sales up to 20% by using analytics to tailor experiences to the one person that matters most. That's what I'm working on. I'm an IBMer. Let's build a smarter planet.
This week on CNBC TV 18 and